What is up, I'm Spear, and today I'm proud to show you FrameCV, a rack extension utility I made in order to bring some of the power of sequencer automation into the rack. FrameCV lets you specify CV curves for 6 individual mods, which can be used to control any parameter in the reason rack that accepts a CV input. We can set up curves simply by clicking on one of the 16 frames in the interactive display, then dragging up or down to set a value. If there are multiple active frames, FrameCV will interpolate the values between frames to set up a curve. We can disable a frame simply by clicking on the highlighted area towards the bottom of the display. To set up actual curvature, we can click on a frame and then drag to the left or right outside of the frame and then up or down to set a curvature value for that frame. The CV values can be accessed on the back of the device with the designated CV outputs. Cool, let's use FrameCV to add some movement to the subtractor patch. First up, I want to use the blue mod to control the frequency on filter 1, so let's hook it up. Because FrameCV sends out unipolar CV values, we'll also want to reduce the frequency on filter 1 all the way to 0. Unipolar CV values are simply added on top of the current setting of the parameter that they are connected to, so in order to control the full range of the frequency on the filter, it has to be at 0. Let's set up a curve that looks a little something like this. We'll bring it up with a bit of curvature, and then back down to about halfway, and then we'll have a little hill at the end, and then go back down. Let's see what this sounds like. Alright, as you can see, I'm controlling where the curve is queried using the position knob towards the bottom of the device. Cool, let's make things a little more interesting using the violet mod on the frequency modulation amount. Since frequency modulation can mess the sound up pretty bad on the subtractor with high values, we'll bring down the trim knob to 4, so quite drastically. And then we'll switch to the violet mod using the mod selector to the bottom left of the device, and set up a pretty boring curve just going steadily upwards to about halfway. Already sounds a lot more interesting. If we want to see what each of our mod is doing, we can click on the gray square right to the right of the mod selector squares to see all of our mods in action. Alright, the beauty of CV in the Reason Rack is that we can use one FrameCV unit to control multiple instruments and multiple devices. I'm now gonna chuck in a rack extension effect from the kilohertz toolkit, and I'm gonna use the Foreman filter for this. And I'm gonna use mod beige and turquoise to control the X and Y parameter on this rack extension. So let's flip the rack and hook him up and bring him down to 0 right here. Setting up the position so that the filter is open, we can now check what each value of our mod here will sound like simply by sweeping up and down. Alright, I'm now just gonna dial in a pretty random curve, just to save some time, and let's see what we got. Oh, we got a little bit of attitude, which is nice. Alright, I think we've made this sound a lot more interesting and added a lot more movement to it. And it's kind of cool that we can do that in the rack now as well, and not just in the sequencer with automation. If we want to bring this into the sequencer, we have a couple of options. We can either automate the position knob or automate the trigger button. The trigger button simply triggers one complete run-through, which means the position will move to the right until it's back where it was at the beginning. It'll wrap around at the end. We can dial in the speed of the run-through using the speed knob. So we could automate that as well. But one thing that I like a lot about FrameCV and how it all came together is that we can actually get away with no automation at all using the CV input for the gate on the trigger. And we can simply grab the mod.env output on the subtractor and hook it up to the trick gate in on the FrameCV. Now if we use a very short decay on this mod envelope, every time I hit a note, the mod envelope will open up, it'll trigger one complete run through on the FrameCV, adding all the movement to the sound without any kind of automation at all. And in the sequencer I can just record my MIDI clip and it'll be a lot less cluttered as if we automated all of these values that we have controlled with our FrameCV unit. So now that this is hooked up, I can simply play a note on my keyboard and it'll result in all of this crazy action. Alright, I hope you got an idea of what FrameCV is all about, and I encourage you to try it out and see if it can add anything to your workflow in Reason. Have a good one of whatever you're having.